Item 1 is attendance. There's a sheet going around. I'm sure everybody will sign it. Item 2 is apology. I understand Gwenera Clark can't make it. Item 3 is declaration of interest, Linda.
Thank you, Leader. I think item 12 involves 3 primary schools, and if there are any members who are council-appointed governors, they should declare personal interest. I think that may involve Councillor Daniels, is that right?
Yep, that's correct.
Thank you. And
I'll declare interest as a council-appointed governor of Ysgol Penteg in that case.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. And then I think on item 13, of course, we've got some changes. Sorry. No, that won't be involved. Thank you, Leader. If I go on to item 13, which involves the Education Achievement Service, and I think Councillor Richard Clark, you'll be a council-appointed director on that. So again, that's another personal interest to declare. Councillor Hunt.
Just one item of inquiry. Item 8 on the agenda is the disposal of Trosnet House and the Brass Band building to a registered social landlord. I'm not aware of which registered social landlord that is, but I'm on the board of one of them, as is Councillor Clark. Do we have to declare an interest there?
Just one moment. I'll just. There's no mention specifically in relation to that, but if in an excess of caution, there are only a small number of registered social landlords that are involved.
It's not Burnhaven.
So obviously, that may or may not inform yours, but we don't know. For the purposes of this report, it is just two unnamed social registered landlords. Thank you.
Right, thanks for that then. Item 4 is the confirmation of the Cabinet minutes, page 5 to 14. I'll go through those. Page 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 and 14. Somebody move the editorial record? No, thanks for that. Also, item 5 is the update on actions, Chief Executive.
Thank you, Leader. They are there for information unless members have any questions.
Right, thanks for that. Item 6 now is financial results 2015-16. This will be, Dave Lilly.
Thank you, Leader. Okay. Thank you, Leader. This is the outturn report for the 2015-16 financial year. So it outlines to Cabinet the revenue position, capital position and our reserves position as at the 31st of March 2016. So it follows on from the reports that you've received during the year of the monitoring position. So we bring quarterly reports to you, and this just draws up the actual position that occurred in 15-16. So in paragraph 3.1, the key message is the revenue position that we found ourselves in at the end of the year was a positive position. It was very similar to the position that we reported during the year, which was an underspend on the revenue account. That then position was used in the construction of our 16-17 estimates and in the medium-term financial planning process. All service areas still have service areas balances by which they can manage their in-year pressures and any change, and the general fund balance at the end of 31st of March 2016 is slightly higher than we anticipated during the year, and that was because we wrote back a reserve that was no longer needed in usage. So there are two key tables within the report. First one is at 5.1, which outlines the position we found ourselves in. So the fourth column across outlines the position that the authority found itself in total. We then transferred 2.2 million of the underspend into service area reserves. which left then a £1.9 million underspend, which we transferred through to one corporate reserve, and that corporate reserve is the redundancy reserve, to assist us with any change proposals that are going to come forward in future years. The second table is in 5.2 on the top of page 19, which gives you an outturn position on the mitigations that we adopted for the budget process. So we adopted, we were going to make £7.5 million worth of savings during the course of the year. The report outlines that nearly 90% of those savings were achieved. 732 alternatives were found, and we only didn't achieve 97,000, which is just less than 1%. So a very good position there. Paragraphs 5.4 through to 5.14 then outline the position and provide a commentary on all services, where they are, and also provide a commentary on the mitigations that weren't achieved and how the services managed those alternative mitigations. I wasn't intending on running through that, but obviously I'll take any questions at the end if you need be. Moving on then to paragraph 6 on page 24. This paragraph outlines the relationship between the outturn that we find ourselves with and the budget setting process that we completed in March. And this table just outlines a number of the principal reductions that we found, which came about during monitoring, which we then took effect of during the 16-17, 17-18 process. So you'll see there that near enough in the first 7 bullet points there that they total about £2 million. So of the underspend of £4 million, £2 million the specific items which were built into the 16-17 budget, and then we have some generic savings where service areas would have reviewed their staffing structures, taken out vacant posts, and that type of thing. Paragraph 7 then is a very small table on the capital programme. Again, another positive position where over 88% of our capital programme was delivered to time at the specification. There have been some slippages, and the reasons for the slippages are outlined in 7.2. One of the slippages, or underspend, did allow us to put into the 16-17 budget the additional £1 million for highways maintenance programme for use in 16-17. Paragraph 8 then outlines our financial standing, with paragraph 8.3 giving you a summary of the reserves position of the authority. And we find ourselves in a positive position with the general fund balance standing at 5.5 million, the service area balance is standing at 5 million, school balances remaining fairly static at just over 2.2 million, the insurance reserve just over £3 million, corporate type reserves at 3.5 million, which is mainly the redundancy reserve, and then we've got a very small item in provisions, which is an accounting deliberation there. So paragraph 8.4 outlines the usage of the general fund balance in 15-16. So you can see the outline. The first two there were outlined as part of the budget setting process for 15-16. Then we have the schools decommissioning costs at Lantana and Pont-y-Wynedd, and then there were a number of smaller contributions from the reserve as well. It's been supplemented back by the Investor Save Reserve, which we wrote back in here because we haven't had the demand, so we put it back into the general fund balance to be used from the general fund balance if it's needed. So paragraph 8.5 then outlines it straddles page 26, page 27. It outlines the service area balances. The only thing to draw out there, so those balances there take into account the outturn positions referred to in the earlier table, the first table. We have moved two reserves out of service area balances into corporate balances. The first one being the Planning and Public Protection Reserve, which we moved into corporate balances and rebadged it as the LDP reserve. So as we move forward for the next LDP for 2021 to 2036, where we have to prepare that LDP shortly, that resource will be used for that. And we've also moved the ICT reserve out of a service balance into a corporate balance because it can be used for more corporate initiatives. 6.6 outlines the position we find ourselves within with our schools balances. 8.7, my glasses, is insurance resources, which outlines there we're starting just under 3.1. And then there's the outline in 8.8 of the corporate reserves, where again we've got the corporate redundancy reserve 1.1 million and the LDP 400,000 and the ICT 339, and then the other reserves listed there. The last section of the report is the reserves policy. This is just a reiteration of the reserves policy that you approve every year. Nothing new in it at all. It just reaffirms that everything has to be done. Reserves have to be approved before the income, the spend is incurred, and that's by Councillor Hunt, and that each service area will produce a schedule of how they plan on using their service area balances for the forthcoming year. So in conclusion, it's a positive position. We through our monitoring processes, we have used the positive position in construction of the 16-17 budget. I'd like to commend the report to you. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Dave. Any members, before I bring Anthony Hunt in, want to make a comment? John?
Can I say that the mitigation measures we took initially in the beginning of the year, I think, was extremely challenging to everybody. So I think it's a credit that we've come in where we have come in, albeit not on 100%, but, you know, the best part of what we're trying to achieve. But the question I want there are a number of areas that we put into our mitigation program that obviously there was some delayed implementation. So that will obviously carry on, presumably, into the next financial year. And so we should be able to achieve what we said in our mitigations, albeit not in this particular financial year, but in the next. Is that right?
That's correct. That's correct, yeah. So there are a couple that weren't achieved in full or either partial this year, and there's some that have rolled into the 16-17 position, and they will be achieved as part of the 16-17 estimates.
Well, John shows you read the report. Anthony Hunt?
Thank you, Leader. I'd like to thank Dave for the reports and Nigel and other officers for their work over the year, which has led to this positive position. If we can just maybe reflect on the alternative position we'd find ourselves in if we were having to deal with overspends on top of the savings that we've been having to make year on year, I think it's worth praising the work that's been done to ensure good financial management. Along those lines as well, I think it's worth praising the record that we've got of closing our accounts quickly. Our accounts are closing out for audit now, and Torfaen again is recognised across Wales as being, as having best practice in this respect. I think that's down to the good work of Dave and his team, and that's something we should commend as members, because it gives us one fewer headache to have to deal with in such difficult financial times. I welcome the point in 5.2 that 90% of the mitigations from the 15-16 budget have been delivered. This is important again as it prevents us having to go back, take more money from services and make more difficult decisions. And I think it's especially worth saying, to reflect what John said really, that it's not easy in such difficult financial times, both when the quantum of savings that we have to make is so high, repeated year on year, and also when the savings become ever more difficult year on year, and you have to be maybe ever more sort of creative with how you save money. If you just stop doing things, which we try to avoid doing, in some respects that's quite easy from a savings point of view, bar the sort of the delay issue that sometimes happens, because you're just going from 1 to 0. But if you're trying to manage budgets to keep things going, it makes those savings more difficult to achieve, because sometimes there's sort of unpredictabilities in there. So I think in that context, the record that we've got that's explained in 5.2 is one that's worthy of praise. So the outturn's positive. And I think financial resilience in the climate that gives us is vital for the sustainability of local services. We sometimes lose track of that looking through balance sheets, but at the end of the day, this is the running of schools for our children, the running of social care for vulnerable people, the upkeep of our areas that depends on us being able to live a sound financial basis. So it's not just dry sheets of money. This is vital for the delivery of local services, and I think that's worth emphasising. It's important to note throughout the report the percentages as well as the sums. Sometimes sort of headlines are bandied about underspends or overspends, which forget that you're dealing in a context of services with budgets running into tens of millions of pounds, and services often where the sort of spending levels and the demand levels can be unpredictable, and things can come along during the year that were unexpected. So I think all the figures within the report have to be looked at in that context, not just in an absolute context. Now, many of the figures have been anticipated. Many of the figures have been built into our medium-term financial plan, into how we plan for the future, how we mitigate some of the cuts coming down from central government looking forward to the future. So that's something that's shows again good financial planning. However, I think it's important that we maybe reflect, and that departments reflect and think about how we use this positive outturn strategically, about how we use our reserves strategically to boost our priority areas that we've outlined in the Corporate Plan 3. This Council has always had modest reserves, as outlined in Section 8. 8.4 mentions that the general fund balance would equate to running local services for just 8 days. So whilst balances can't be used just to prop up services and avoid difficult decisions as our funding is cut from above, we can, however, think carefully about how we use the positive situation, this outturn, how we use our sound financial management, and how we use our reserves to look forwards, to boost areas of spending that we value most highly as a council, and to protect the most important parts of our service delivery against the continual threat that we face as local government of cuts upon cuts. So I would like to thank officers for their work on this, but very much view this as sort of the start of a conversation going forwards about how we can best recycle money where possible, and how we can push as members to use the positive situation for the benefit of local services and the people that we represent.
Good, excellent overview, Andy, and good work, Dave, and your team. Pass on our congratulations as well. You see the recommendations on page 32, all agreed, show. Thank you for that. Now then, the next item is item 7, appointment of joint committee and partnerships. This was written by Richard, but is presented by Richard Clark.
Well, yeah, I didn't know that. It's a report that comes to Cabinet every year, explaining the membership of outside bodies. It's more or less the same as last year. Councillor Lewis Jones has stood down as the alternate on the EAS to be replaced by Councillor David Daniels, and Councillor Nigel Davis has stood down from the Grant Crematorium body. It's something that we have after the AGM every year, and it's there for members to consider.
Thank you for that, Rich. Any comments by members? All agree with the report, Joe? Thank you for that. Now then, we're on to item 8, which is the disposal of Prosnant House and Brass Band Buildings, Pontypool, to a registered social landlord, and this is Duncan himself.
This is to seek approval for the sale of Trosnant House and the Brass Band Building below market value. Each of these properties is part of the VVP programme that we've got for going forward in Pontypool, and the money from the Pontypool Investment Fund is allocated to these properties. Their refurbishment will provide 10 new affordable housing units. That's between the two of them. If you go to paragraph 5.2.1, the valuation of the property stands at 70,000 for Trosvern House and 44,000 for the brass band building. If you then move to paras 5.32 to 5.34, you'll see that a significant, when you take into account the income from those buildings once those they're used for affordable housing, there's a deficit between the end value of, for Trosvern House at least, of 200, the end value of 250. There's a deficit on that in terms of the money you're putting in of around 300,000, and in terms of the brass band building, same calculation, there's a deficit there of around 239,000. The RSL has offered to buy the sites at 60,000, respectively, Trosvern House and brass band 60,000, 25,000. Disposal best consideration, this is 5.4, below £2 million. If we're disposing at less than best value, we've got effectively delegated powers from Welsh Government to do that, so the powers are there. Then move on to paragraph 5.7. There is a final test that you apply in these situations, and essentially the way it works is that the RSL contribution must exceed the completed value of the properties. Now, if you look, the completed values at 250 and 200,000, which is 450. The input from the RSL is 481,000. And I'll just add to this, these buildings would not come forward if it weren't for VVP funding. So actually dropping the value here is helpful to the scheme in bringing these back into some form of useful use. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that. Any comments by members? Lewis, I know you.
Yes, I'm pleased to see that this is going ahead this morning, because these are two elderly properties within the council's portfolio of properties. The People's Centre gone into demise a long time ago. That property has been idle for about 2 years. The brass band building, their lease expired some 5 or 6 years ago, and you know, it pains to see properties being left idle when there's so many people on the housing waiting list. And you know, I welcome this, and certainly appreciate all the work that's gone in by officers. And you know, I know we're talking about valuations, but at the end of the day, we see properties in the town and valuations are completely unreal due to the circumstances of the economy and other trading positions within the town. So I'm certainly glad that we got a realistic proposal here today, and it's going to affect favourably the housing waiting list. Thanks.
Thanks for that. I'll call Anthony Henton at the moment, who wants to speak on this. You'll see at the end the Cabinet grants delegated authority, the Deputy Leader is the Executive Portfolio Holder for Resources and Governance. So what would you want?
I just wanted to speak to support what Lewis has said, really. Sometimes with issues like this, the last time we took a similar decision, there was a bit of mischief making about it. But the realpolitik of it is that either we do something with these buildings to help create some affordable housing and to regenerate an area that needs regeneration, or the buildings go to ruin, become an eyesore, and become a magnet for antisocial behaviour. So I think it's quite right that we dispose of these at less than best value, that we give a local registered social landlord the chance to turn them into affordable housing and to bring the look of the area up a bit. So that's what we're trying to do, and I very much support that.
Right, thanks for that. Norwood report, all agree? Sure, thanks very much. On then to item 9, which is proposed collaboration with Blaine and Gwent, Environmental Health. This is Kim Pugh. Kim, over to you.
Good morning. The purpose of the report is to seek approval for the continuation of the collaboration that we're undergoing with Blaine and Gwent to deliver a joint public protection service. By developing a joint environmental health service now, which will be the last part really in delivering all the public protection services together. Some key messages are that trading standards and licensing have both been delivered as joint services since October last year. They went trading standards on the 1st of October and licensing partway through. And this has been very successful. The benefits are in the report at section 5 and has resulted in greater resilience with both very small service areas, so that just increasing the number of staff has a massive effect, and some savings resulting from sharing managers and some small savings on duplications of what staff do, making the services more effective. Delivering environmental health services in the same manner will allow even greater resilience with a slightly bigger service area, covering a larger area of work with quite specialist areas, and it will allow the services, current services that we provide for the public, to be maintained. Without the collaboration, I feel that there is a risk that we would have to stop delivering some of the statutory services that we currently do. The incremental approach was used for both trading standards and licensing, and was very successful, both in achieving staff buy-in, in building services together, getting service resilience, sharing intelligence, plus the savings that I've detailed. So looking at environmental health going forward, we've obviously learned some of the lessons from what happened with the other two, because there were some challenges, mainly with linking IT systems, things like that. We did consider whether we should continue the collaboration in the same way, with the focus being on adding resilience and minimising disruption to frontline services and just sharing the management side of it, or to continue it on a more formal basis. It's felt that at the moment the timescales for transferring staff formally would result in a further deterioration of service provision before we could actually get any savings in place and any resilience in place. And in addition, the ongoing uncertainty over local government reorganisation makes the less formal collaboration more favourable for us to continue with. So for those reasons, I would like to recommend that Cabinet approve the continuation of the collaboration with Blaenau Gwent to deliver the joint public protection service by developing environmental health as the last part of that, using the same informal mechanisms that have been successful to date, focusing on shared management and a minimum disruption to frontline services.
Thank you for that. Any comments? John?
Yeah, in the absence of Gwynaira, obviously she's supporting this report. It's her discipline at the end of the day. But given what we've heard in recent weeks about local government reorganisation, now they probably won't on the back burner as they want. I think this cross-authority working will be the way forward to provide our frontline services now, some of our frontline services. So it's worked quite well, I think, with trading standards and others. And I think it's obviously given the department that developing that opportunity then to look at other services throughout. So certainly, on behalf of Gwynaira and myself, I would support the report.
Good, thanks for that, Anthony.
No, I very much support this report and the work that's been done. I think if you'd listened to certain quarters in the past 5 years, you'd have thought local government was a blanket of sort of stick in the mud and resistance to transformation. I think we can well and truly say that's not true in Torfaen and in Gwent, even if it is anywhere else, and that we're more than prepared to look to collaborate and innovate in the interests of service delivery. I think it's worth praising the staff in that context, because they've had to adapt and be flexible in very challenging times, and they've really taken that forwards. So I just praise the report and hope that it's noted in coming years that local councils like Torfaen are willing to look at how we provide services and how we can be innovative in the interest of the people we serve.
Well done. You've said everything I was going to say. It does prove that Torfaen is up. No, Torfaen is up for collaboration in any form, and that is the way forward with any authority within the locality. And this proves the point that it can be done, and our officers know how to do it. Thank you very much for the report. Paul Shaw, please. Thank you. 10 now then is the basic economic analysis for the South East Wales region. This is going to be Dawson Evans. Come on down, Dawson.
Just to give the background of the report. The report is part of the work being done by a business development group under SUDA originally and now City Deal. It was felt through discussions that there was a lack of economic analysis for the region as the 10 authorities, although there was a lot of stuff around Wales and a lot of stuff around local authorities. So a group was pulled together to commission the report, which ACOM were granted the contract to provide. And I think the main issues and finding was the economic performance of the region as a whole is behind the UK in everything, and is behind ahead of Wales in some respects, but behind Wales figures in others. It came across the need for collaboration once again with all the authorities. They're working together to pull future projects together. Demand-led growth was identified as the way forward, so that involves working with the private sector as well as our public sector collaborations. There were key sectors identified. These include finance and professional services, energy and environment, advanced materials and manufacturing, ICT and life sciences seem to be the ones where the driver for everything that we have to achieve now is an increase in GVA, and they are key sectors for that drive to increase the GVA, which is gross value added for further information. So that's where it says one of the key things that came out as well is maximising the benefits of infrastructure investment. There's a big infrastructure investment around transport going to take place in the City Deal, and we have to make sure that locally those opportunities are maximised for the benefit of the region as a whole. Addressing the inequalities that came across. There's a big inequality with regards to performance of regions, whereby competitively Monmouthshire and Cardiff are the only two in the top half of the regions for the UK, whereas regions like Blaenau and Gwent is last for competitiveness, and Torfaen is also in the bottom 10. So, but when you looked at it, the skew was of the usual problems around the old industries and replacing the old industries is still prevalent. So that's where that comes across. Then the report looks at some of the strengths that we need to build on for the South East Wales. Manufacturing specialisms, and that's prevalent in Torfaen especially, that we have a lot of niche manufacturers that have found something that they can compete on. It's not just price, it's quality and skill. So those kinds of things came through. There's a base with key clusters developing, so there are clusters of good practice developing in the region already, so we need to build on those. Local authority business support came across as being very valued by businesses as well, which seems to cut across the feelings of Welsh Government, but through their Business Wales programme. But the local approach was felt to be very appropriate by businesses. The 3 enterprise zones within the region were seen as a strength, and I think you've seen some examples around Aston Martin going to the Vale of Glamorgan and TVR, hopefully to Evervale. Cardiff has a growing knowledge economy as well, which we need to take advantage of, and I think that's where the Metro, making it easier to get into Cardiff, will take advantage of those job opportunities as well. Something that came up was UK tenure employment rate growth and substantial South East Wales has outperformed the UK in business startups numbers and percentages than the rest of the UK. So we need to build on that. But the anomaly with that is, although business startups and businesses are increasing, the 3-year survival rates seem to be coming down, which needs addressing. And then the other thing is, self-employment as a percentage of the employment figures still isn't increasing in line with the number of business start-ups. So there's a lot of work around that that needs to be addressed as well. Although Wales isn't really recognised for research and development, there are some strong pockets of it in existence, and we need to build on that. The existing and planned investment in major infrastructure, as I said earlier, we really do need to build on that. So that's what the report identified, and this will now form the basis of going forward for future projects under the City deal. You've been asked to agree that this is the basis of the projects going forward, and to note the findings, really. So that's where the report is.
Thank you very much for that, Dawson. A number of interesting comments have come out of this. John Cunningham made the point in the last issue around reorganisation, which is now not going to take place on the basis of the map, but myself and the Chief Executive are heavily involved in City Deal, and from our point of view as a local authority, and indeed the 9 other industrial authorities that make up the South Wales group are actively engaged in this. And I think what we need is a presentation on City Deal, because it covers every aspect of what we're doing, and I think members need to be brought up to speed. It's a good report. Thanks very much for producing it. Any other members got any comments to make? If not, then you all agree the recommendation. Sure. Thank you very much, Dawson. Thank you. Fine. Item 11 now then is the award of a civil engineering term service contract for 2016 to 2020, and this is Andrew Williams. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you, Leader. The report requests that Cabinet approve the award of a civil engineering term contract to a panel of 4 contractors. We've previously procured using this method, and the last one ran out in the end of March 2016. The estimated value of the works to go through the contract exceeded the 3.5 million threshold, so the OGU advertising, the European OGU advertising procedure kicked in, so we advertised the contract through that. The averages between sort of 1 million and 1.5 million we put through the previous term contracts. What the term service contract will cover is general civil engineering works, footway and carriageway construction, road safety engineering schemes, drainage works and highway resurfacing works. The background to it is that the panel, the 4 contractors, will provide sufficient capacity and resilience to deliver the projects that hopefully we'll get, with capital projects will get awarded over the 4-year period of the contract. And the efficiency saving we've get with this process, which we've used previously, is that we don't have to tender each individual project as we go through. So the way the contract was assessed, it was assessed on price only, it was one long, if I take this now, one long schedule of rates, which we evaluated one number of each rate in the schedule, and we also put some sample projects through that, just to get a good feel of the spread of the rates. And there's also some adjustment percentages for work that's not actually covered by the schedule of rates. So based on that cost evaluation, and the 5.7 gives the score of the 8 price tenderers, and we've selected the winners of the tenders were contractors A to D, and the report is anonymised. So the conclusion or the recommendation is to approve award of the contract.
Thank you for that, Andrew. John, do you want to make a comment on this?
Just to support the report, Chairman, I mean, obviously this is tried and tested because we've done it for a number of years now, and obviously gives us that opportunity where we don't have to go to tender for every contract that we've got now. It's been about over a 3-year period, so it means that we just go through OGIA once for the period of the contract, and that's obviously saves money, saves time, etc. So I would certainly commend the report.
Any other members got any comments to make? If not, all agree the report. Sure. Thanks very much. Thank you very much, Andrew. Can I say thank you, Duncan, for allowing some of your officers that were responsible for compiling these reports to bring them forward. I compliment you on that. No, absolutely. I think it's important that people do the work at in the background. They're given an opportunity to come to the foreground. Right then, we're on now to item 12, which is Llantarnam and Blenheim Road Community Primary School and Ystygant Panteg to modify implication dates of the proposal, and this is Dermot. Over to you, Dermot.
Thank you, Leader. Leader, you've said it there, really. We're looking for permission to change the opening date, the implementation date for the 3 schools. 3.3 details the reasons why we need to do that, which is really to do with the ongoing issues around the tendering process at the beginning, particularly around Llantarnam and Blenheim, and then site access issues around Panteg. We've made really good progress in terms of the builds, and if you've been near any of the sites, you'll see the steelwork and brickworks all up and in place, and they're really motoring on now as contractors. But we won't be able to bring back that time to get them open for September in the new next year. So the dates there are given in 2.1, where we think we will need to open them. And really, following this decision, if you agree, we'll be in contact with all our statutory partners and the community, and obviously parents, and let them know. And just to offer a reassurance, we obviously have a transitional group already in place for each of the schools. We're working very closely with the governing bodies, the head teachers, and we'll make sure that everyone is fully aware of the change if agreed.
Good, thanks, Dermot. David, Joel.
I think we need to look on the positive side of this and concentrate on the fact that we have 3 new builds under progress, and that's a reflection of how well we've worked within the remit of the 21st Century Schools programme. I think anybody that has any understanding of building and development works realises that anything can go wrong from day one right through to completion. So the start dates and the completion dates of any project are subject to the whim of all sorts of things that can intervene and hijack the whole process. I think given all of those caveats, the development of the 3 sites, and I'm particularly impressed by the way in which Ysgol Panteg has come along, because they suffered an excessive hold-up at the beginning because of a wrangle over access, and anybody that's taken the time out to visit that particular site would be amazed at the progress that's been made and the speed with which they've caught up. But all 3 schools are moving along at some significant pace, and I'm well impressed with the whole thing. But I think, as I said at the beginning, we need to concentrate on the positives here, and that is that we have 3 brand new schools in the development, and in very short order these schools will be up and running and taking the issue from other areas that are under pressure at the moment. And I commend the report, and I hope everybody else will support it.
Good, thanks for that. Good report, good progress being made. All agree the report, please show. Thanks very much for that. We're on to item 13, which is an update commissioning agreement for the Education Achievement Services. Again, this is Dermot, over to you.
Thanks, Leader. This could either be a really simple report or a really complicated one, depending how much detail we want to go into. Just a quick sort of history lesson. Obviously, 4 years ago, the Education Achievement Service was set up as a private company. At that point, the government's arrangements were agreed. In the meantime, Welsh Government issued a national model for regional working, which brought new requirements in and created some complexity, shall we say, in terms of the legal agreement and the governance arrangements around the company, the Education Achievement Service. So there's been an ongoing discussion with Welsh Government and with independent legal advice, which was supplied through Caerphilly. So this is obviously a consortium piece of work. And this report, Leader, is written in the way it is, business going to all 5 cabinets, because obviously all 5 parties need to agree this. So There's been an ongoing discussion with legal advice, and that's culminated in this report, which now tries to clarify the new proposals around the governance arrangements and some other changes that make sure that we're compliant with the national model, and also gives us a robust process for ensuring that the company goes from strength to strength. I should also add, just as a sort of as a side comment, the Aston inspection of the regional consortium are underway at the moment. The one finished 2 weeks ago, a week and a bit ago. That report will come out in July. Now, I can't obviously talk about the detail because that's subject to final confirmation from Aston, but we're very pleased with how that inspection went. And Aston did look at and comment on a draft version of this report as part of that. All I'll say is that we're pleased with the outcome and obviously look forward to receiving the final report. So the key changes, the key issues in terms of where we think we need to move to is that this report details an updated governance arrangement which is compliant with the national model. There were some changes suggested here to the way that grants are dealt with, partly because the ES still receives grant from Welsh Government sometimes very late in the day. It creates real difficulties in getting things through an appropriate process that allows the company to look at the grant, see if the grant actually meets its priorities, which are our priorities because we've agreed that through the business case that's been to Cabinet before, and to then in a timely fashion get on with the work if it needs to be got on with and to get approvals. So we've changed we've suggested some changes to the way that happens so that directors going forward would make those decisions, but all of those decisions would get referred back through the Joint Executive Group, which Councillor Yole sits on with the other 4 executive members on a regular basis. So there's still very tight scrutiny, but it enables the company to be more fleet of foot in responding to some opportunities that come in. The third point, the ES ability to provide services to other customers is around the ES being allowed to actually be commissioned by other providers to provide services to them, to income generate. Now again, one of the key tenets, I think, in our work around this updated governance agreement is to make sure that whatever happens, the EAS is there to deliver school improvement services for the region, primarily. That is their core function, so nothing can get in the way of that. So while this is allowing the EAS to actually income generate, which would reduce our bill ultimately, it needs to enhance our service provision. It cannot take away from it. So throughout the document and throughout the Cabinet itself, you'll see that we've built in a number of safeguards to ensure that the company board are well cited, that the JEG, the Joint Executive Group, are well cited, and so we're directors, that we're not simply taking on new business to earn income at the cost of potentially threatening our own improvement journey. So there are a series of bullet points there summarising on page 77 the section around how that new income will be looked at. So rather than read those through later, I think you'll see that there's a series of safeguards built in there and reporting arrangements. The last bullet point in terms of the key messages on the top of page 78 looks at what happens if there's a problem and the ES overspend. Now clearly there shouldn't be an overspend because budget monitoring is such that the ES closely monitor where the money is coming and going. We work very closely with the EAS through the regional group, and obviously we are the banker for the EAS as well and provide that service to them. But in an instance where, for whatever reason, there is an overspend, this now formalises the agreement that the EAS will basically pay us that back through reduced contributions in subsequent years through a process of negotiation. It's not licensed to simply overspend, though, and I think that's a critical point. Do I stop there, Leader, and just ask for any comments?
I think that's sufficient. Dave Yole, do you want to make a comment?
Only to say that once you said we needed to be compliant with a Wales-wide judgment by WAG in terms of how these consortia should operate, you've said it all, because the rest is the detail of how that compliance could be met. I think it's worth commenting on it, and I don't intend to go over the detail again because Dermot has done an excellent job on that, but I think it's worth mentioning this, that at a meeting that we had in Llandrydnod, I think it was back last summer, we were amazed, the reps from the EAS consortium, how different and how more progressive it would appear that the other consortia were, and in turn those representatives from other consortia were equally amazed at how different their setup was to ours. Now, fundamentally, that was because we've been set up as a limited company, and of course that imposed certain restrictions on the way that we could do business. But we have been talking to the EAS from the position of JEG, that's the Joint Educational Group, during this period, and I'd like to think that those conversations, those meetings that we've had, has helped in terms of progress in this. But ultimately, what's happening is directly as a consequence of the need to be compliant. Where JEG, I think, has helped is that we have a different kind of feel to the way in which JEG operates, and there's more of a snap, more of a bite to it now, which was a concern of mine initially. We have an audit committee that is set up to do what audit committees do. That is going to prove a successful addition to the way that ES does the business. The other things that Dermot has commented on all go to the route of improving services, and at the same time, over a period, a longer period, reducing contributions. Dermot mentioned the recent inspection, ESTIN inspection of the EAS, and one of the questions that came out in the session that I had was what's your view of value for money, whether or not the EAS is value for money. And it's quite simply put, there's a far, far more sophisticated argument than this, and I won't bore you with the details of that, but simply put, it's a question of our results are going up progressively, and our contribution at the same time is going down. So the equity gap between, on the one hand, how we are performing as a consequence of being aligned to EAS and what we pay for that service proves that there is value for money. And I believe that the changes that we are looking to get or the recommendations that we are looking to get supported can only enhance that positive picture over a longer period of time. So I would certainly recommend it, and hope everybody else does.
Well done. And value for money is what we're all about. And there's been a lot of hard work put into this by members. Any other members want to make a comment? If not, the recommendation is there. Please show. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dermot. Now, the last item, I'm going to defer this item, not because there's anything wrong with the report, so I hope the author doesn't feel that anybody's critical of that. It's just that I've had requests of a number of members that they need to understand it better, so we'll defer it to the next meeting. Now, having done that, that concludes the meeting, and I'll close the meeting.